Hello and welcome. Today I want to talk about why management reporting, monthly reporting, is essential for success. And I believe that, there is that old saying, what you measure, you can manage. And some people deride that. And some people talk about it's not about managing and measurement. But for me, it's in understanding those numbers. It's using those numbers to make better decisions. And that's the key to regular reporting. It's having that knowledge. You can make business decisions based on your gut instinct. You can make business decisions based on the money in your bank account. I had one client once in the past who that's how he kept track of the business. As long as he had a certain balance in his bank account, he knew he was fine. And he was, but it could have been so much better if he did more. That was the challenge that I had, that he could have done so much more if he'd made time to understand his numbers more. It was a very successful business. Sure, it still is. Been handed down to the son now. I'm not quite sure how it's operating. Don't know. And that just always kind of sat in my mind as to he's missing out. He never really knew how well he was operating. And he probably could have saved some money, he could have made some more profit if he'd focused more. But he was one of the lucky ones because his business was profitable, was successful. And so in some ways he got away with only looking at the money in his bank account. But for most people, that's not the case. And for most people, having those numbers to look at and being able to use those numbers to make decisions, that's where the key is. One time I had a client come to me. He was in a bit of strife. He borrowed money against his house to put into the business. He didn't really know where he owed money to. He just knew he owed money to various people, but not how much. And he actually used to check his bank account multiple times a day to see if some money had come into it. And then he would pay whoever had been on the phone chasing him the hardest. So, the more you phoned, the more likely it was you'd get paid. But he had a big contract coming up, and he had a big contract. It wasn't in the bag, but he knew he had the contract, and he employed a couple of people. A couple of people became available that he knew would be good for the contract, so he employed them. The problem was he didn't have the contract in the bag. And so he borrowed more money against his mortgage on his house and put more money in the business. And we looked at the numbers, we looked at where he was up to, and we started to focus on the numbers, and that was a big wake-up call because suddenly he realised that whilst it was, on the one hand, it sounded like a great idea to snap up these people because they would be really good to deliver the service on this new contract, the challenge was he didn't have the contract in the bag. And he really, really, really needed that and a deposit paid up front very, very quickly. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to pay them. The better decision he would have been for him if he'd approached me before when he was talking about this new contract and what would the impact be, and then look at, okay, well, this is what we need. We've got these people available. Yeah, but you can't really sign them up and employ them until you've got the contract in place. You really need the money coming in to ensure that you've got the money to pay for them, and there's still likely to be a bit of a time delay as well. That would have been a better result for him, and if he'd been looking at the numbers on a regular basis, that would have been a different decision, a different focus. But his figures weren't up to date, so that was a problem. It's in those decisions. I've seen clients who've made decisions about the direction of their business, the ones who have, in looking at the detail, decided that they're going to focus on marketing a particular product or service that would make them more money. That was either some quick wins to get some money in the bank, or was one that had a higher margin, was more profitable. And so concentrating on getting more of those clients was key to them. Making decisions around the affordability of larger premises, bigger rent. What would that look like? Making those decisions, being able to see what that looks like. A staff member who's asking for a significant raise, and what does that look like? Dealing with a staff member who wants to buy into the business, what does that look like? All these things that can be looked at when you're looking at your monthly reporting. It makes it easier to make those decisions when you know where you're at now, currently. Not what the figures were from the end of last financial year. Not where the figures were perhaps 3 months ago when someone pulled some reports, your bookkeeper pulled a report out for you. No, it's knowing what your numbers are every month as you go, because you can make those decisions to change something. Might be a little tweak, a little change, but it'll make a big impact. Might even be in the rostering of your team, or identifying that you've got too many people on at a certain time frame and that you need more people at a different time frame, and changing that rostering around by seeing what's happening. It's in the detail, and you don't see that if you're just looking at the overall, how am I going, what's my bottom line, what's the profit, is there money in the bank, how much money is owing to me. Part of that also in looking at those reports regularly is really chasing up and following up on any of your outstanding invoices. If you've invoiced for your product or service and your client or customer hasn't paid you, you're not their banker. They need to pay the bill, and they need to pay it within your payment terms. And if not, then you need to be chasing them up. And that should be something that's done on a regular basis, like every day, every week. But it's really good to hone in on that again on a monthly basis and go, okay, XYZ company was overdue last month. They're still overdue this month. Okay, now we need to make a decision. Are we going to put it in the hands of a debt collector? Are we going to put it in the hands of a solicitor? Are we going to take legal action? Are we going to put a claim in the courts? What are we going to do? What has that customer or client said about when they're going to pay the bill, and how does that impact our decision on following up, chasing up, and taking potential action for it? And it's also looking at what that profit is and then expanding out what's the upcoming cash flow. So the detailed cash flow forecast in the next few months. What does that look like? Is everything going to be okay? Doesn't need to be a lot of time. When I'm my monthly mentoring clients, we spend an hour together once a month looking at the numbers. There are questions and answers and queries along the way in the middle. That's fine. But we spend an hour together looking at the numbers, going through them, interrogating them, asking questions, thinking about what do they mean, what decisions can we make that will make a difference for a different result next month. And alternatively, what's coming up that will impact those numbers down the track. Part of that's making sure you've got your systems in place, that your data's up to date all the time, that you've got a reporting process in place, learning what those numbers mean, learning how to interpret them. They're not as scary as they look, but perhaps the first thing you need to do is identify where you stand in your knowledge around the numbers. And I've got a business barometer, a quiz. It's not a long one. It won't take you more than a few minutes to do, but check it out. I'll put the link below, and just check out what your result is from that. And maybe even in answering the questions, it'll put to you some questions in your mind that you may need to be addressing, obviously, that come to mind in the nature of the questions. But take that quiz and check out what it says to you. And if you do well, fantastic, that's great. If you want help, then reach out. And even if you do well, you may still want to reach out to get help at a higher level. So take the quiz, see how you're going, and make sure that you're starting to look at those reports on a monthly basis.